Hello to everyone listening on Spotify and watching on YouTube. Today is another episode of NRG Insights, and we're currently going through our lender series at the moment, which is discussing with influential people within the lending market, just about the challenges they've had and the successes, and a little bit about them and obviously the businesses they work for. So today I've got Dimitri, who is the CEO of Avamore Capital. Thanks for joining me, Dimitri.
Hi, thanks, Marcus. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So let's start with, just talk to me about your kind of financial services journey and how you got about to where you are now at Avamore.
Yeah, sure. So my first ever job, 18 years old. I left school with just about two A levels. Realised that I had to go and get a proper job. So I managed to get a job at a now defunct building society. So it was a company called the Chelsea Building Society. Started there as 18 as effectively a cashier, and worked my way up through the ranks. And I ended up being very fortunate that a number of roles seemed to sort of land at the right time for where I was. So I worked my way up to branch manager. The job actually took me down to Devon for a period of time. I then moved back into London, and I managed around the Kensington branch. I did that for maybe 3 or 4 years, and then I became a BDM. So it was back in the days where the mortgage world was buoyant. Those of us old enough to remember,
Good times.
yeah, exactly that. Pre-financial crisis was actually quite a bumper time, and so I did that. I was a BDM for Central London for a few years, and then basically did about 10 years all told. There, I had a brief 6-month hiatus outside of financial services, try something a bit different, but realised financial services was where I wanted to be. And then I joined.
Clawed you back in. Financial services is
Yes, it did. Yeah. It
nice to
sounds a
leave
bit.
behind.
Yeah, it sounds a bit sad, doesn't it? But yeah, it did. It pulled me back in. I then went to work for Octopus. At the time, wasn't a particularly well-known name actually, but I think most people would have now heard of Octopus Group. Initially worked there in the tax team, so I was selling as a BDM the variety of tax efficient investment products.
Yeah.
About a year and a half moved over to their property team. So again, a name that's no longer in the industry, but certainly a lot of the people still are, which was Dragonfly Property Finance. And I stayed there through its several iterations. So
And that's still part of Octopus, yeah, Dragonfly, wasn't it?
it was, yes, yeah, very
Yeah.
much. Yeah, so it's part of the Octopus Group. We then became Octopus Property and subsequently Octopus Real Estate. And my jobs there varied from, again, starting as a BDM. At one point, my BDM patch went as far north as kind of Newcastle and all the way across, and then all the way west down into, or rather across into Wales. So I had a very big patch. Eventually, I was promoted to lead the sales team, and then ultimately I became the head of residential lending, which I was for a couple of years. And then came along about 2.5 years ago, joined Avamore as CEO. And yeah, I've loved it ever since. So it's quite frightening, actually, Marcus. Only when you kind of recall all of those years, put it all together, it all told, I think it's my 25th year now in working in financial services.
Do you know what I always
is,
say is on these, Dimitri, is that everyone does the same thing. I think we all miss out a few years, and it's like I always say, oh yeah, I've been in recruitment 13 years, and I think now it's 16, but I kind of have skipped 3 somewhere. It's only when someone asks you and you look back, you go, oh gosh, yeah, been a
yeah,
while.
yeah, it has.
It's quite
So
nice to look
yeah.
back as well, though, right? Just to have a look and remember where where you've come from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's been quite a journey. It's gone so quick. I can still it feels like yesterday. I remember taking like one of my first jobs back at the Chelsea. But yeah, life comes at you quick, mate. That's true.
Yeah. Well, obviously, there just seems to be a common theme of like similar ages on this, given that the level of people I'm speaking to, and everyone says the same thing. You know, it's a whirlwind, isn't it? It just happens so fast.
Yeah, it is.
So you touched on something there, and I want to touch on that. You said I was very fortunate, a bit lucky that jobs come up. Right, I don't believe that's the case of anyone. But what do you think the difference is? Because you've gone from cashier, but from a very good BDM job, and you've worked your way up through the ranks of a good corporate, and then obviously into a CEO position, which is amazing. But it's not luck, right? There's something you're doing that other people that perhaps don't move aren't. And this is really hard, this bit, right? Because it means you have to look at your, like it's uncomfortable to talk about yourself in such a positive. But what is it? What's the secret to being able to move up the ladder in that way?
Yeah, you're right. It is quite a tough one to answer. I think look, there is a train of thought, that the harder you work, the luckier you get, and I do actually believe there is some truth to that. So, I mean, one of the things I've always tried to do is work harder than my peers or other people around me. I do think that if I look back at my going way back when, maybe my educational background, coming out of school as I did with not a lot, probably kicked me on to work a bit harder than most. So almost from day one, I was always striving to see, like, well, what does that next promotion look like? What do the people look like who are doing that? How do I better them? And generally, it is a lot of hard work. And sometimes I think
Were you
that,
always that way inclined as well? Were you always looking at the next thing, or did it come
yeah, I
naturally?
was. I remember when in fact, I was talking this with my wife the other day, but when I was 18, I remember coming out and going, right, I had a feeling I'm going to prove a point. I felt, I felt a bit, well, let's just say underwhelmed with how
Yeah,
well
yeah.
I or hadn't done at school. And it did put maybe a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, certainly in my early part of my career. And then that kind of kicked me on. And there's been a couple of moments where I feel I've really progressed very quickly, but
Yeah.
there's also been some times when I've plateaued, and I think one of the things I've learned is to listen to feedback a lot more. I think that one of the things about sometimes having a bit of a chip and I'm the best, I'm gonna show you.
I'll show you.
Actually,
Yeah.
it can make you somewhat blinded to other people giving you feedback, and it's taken a couple of times, been a couple of people in my career where I've had some rejection, and whereas my initial reaction might have been to be they're wrong, of course, that actually when I've sat back and reflected, it sounds really cliche and cheesy, but it's true. I've tried to learn from that.
Yeah.
I mean, the,
I
the
think
other
it's
thing
easier at all. We talked about this the other day, that listening is a really tough skill, especially for those driven people that are very focused. And the same as receiving feedback. I think it's something you learn. I mean, did you just get better at it, or is it something that you consciously saw going, do you just get wiser as you get older, or is it something that you've consciously worked on?
um, I I saw it as I went along, and it's one of the things that, again, this was fortunate. There were a couple of people in my early career who gave me some, because actually giving feedback is actually a really difficult thing to do as well. And I think that people don't always recognize that when someone gives you some tough feedback, actually it's been quite, unless they're completely cold, it's been quite a hard thing for them to do. And there were a couple of times where, I remember one in particular incident. This is quite early on. I got turned over or looked over for a promotion, and somebody got it that, in my mind, the kind of this cocky little
Yeah, yeah.
upstart wasn't as good as me. And I was like, what is this? And it took me about a week. And then I remember sitting back and going to speak to the person that had turned me down. And they said, well, these are the reasons why. And I kind of ate some humble pie at that point and learned from it. And actually, I saw what the
Could you see
progression
it? Could you see
happened
it when they explained it,
thereafter.
or was it still a bit like, I'm not sure about?
No, I had to maybe force myself to see it. So,
Yeah,
being honest, in my core, I was still like, well, no, 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 I still think you've got
I
this. I
bet. Yeah.
still think you've got
Well,
this
that's why
wrong.
you go for
But
these promotions, right? You're in it. You don't think because you're second best.
yeah, exactly. And I do think that sometimes, if you say things out loud or you go for a promotion, it doesn't always happen there and then. But what you do is you start to put, you put yourself on someone's radar. And if you look at,
Yeah.
maybe our industry is a good example of it, but so many people similar age-ish to me, similar experience, who've kind of taken that step up. And undoubtedly, there would have come a point where they've applied for a promotion, they got turned down.
Yeah.
But and actually, they probably applied for, and I have done this before, applied for promotions that deep down I knew I wasn't ready for. But I think that if you put yourself into
Those
that
the
position,
seed.
it's yeah, it sows the seed. And actually, when a year later or 6 months later, even something else happens, something else comes available that wasn't necessarily there to start with. Um, that's when it then comes together.
So interestingly enough, I think it obviously going for promotions and that kind of thing. And I've spoken to a lot of kind of CEOs, MDs, sales directors in regards to this. And you've mentioned as well about your hard work, right? Working harder than your peers. I think there's a kind of maybe a disconnect at the moment between when I get this job, I'll do this. And I'm hearing more and more from people about act as though you're doing it already, right? Or put in the graft as though you're doing it, because it's really hard for people to see you in that leadership position without you showing those positives before you've done it. Do you think do you think that helps, or have you seen that in people, especially people that have worked under you? Do you think you need to kind of be doing it before?
100%. And I don't know whether or not it's just a sign of the times. It doesn't necessarily happen as much across industries maybe as it used to. But I think what's the easiest way for somebody to imagine you in that job is to basically do that job. And one of my fundamentals has always been, trust that the rewards will come if you do the right things. And it was something, actually, I'm stealing it from an old company thing, but do the right things when no one's looking. That's kind of how I see it. Always sometimes you don't know what the reward's going to be, but if you do it, just trust that something good is going to come of it eventually.
I suppose it's really easy for me, because obviously I speak to CEOs all day long, and it's really easy for everyone to go, just keep digging in, because you will see the benefit. But obviously it's happened for you guys, right? You're CEOs of businesses. But it's really hard for me to explain that to someone that is early on in their path or early on in their career, because you can't, like I said, I think hindsight's really easy to see. I've become successful because of all the hard work I've put in. But it's hard to explain that, isn't it? If you're like 22, 23, or whatever age, but they're grafted away and they don't see any benefit, because I don't think people see the long term as much as maybe they have done in the past, or think long term. There's a lot of short term kind of gratification, that kind of thing in rightly what they see on social media and everything like that. So how do you go about trying to explain that to the next guys coming through, that you've just got to work hard?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you just got to give that feedback and tell them. And then, at the same time, you've got to be able to give them the tough feedback when they're not doing that. And I think that you can give examples and show other, and I've been very fortunate to have lots of people work with me and for me that have kind of followed through with that. And, if you tell people those stories, hopefully they start to realize it. But there's only so much you can do. At the end of the day, you can't force someone to do it. But actually, I do think that there's a lot of people, and I'm blessed to work with a lot of people like this at the minute, who do instinctively get it. But if they don't, then you still need to be able to give them that feedback initially.
Can you see that early on in like future leaders and that kind of thing? You're fairly good at picking them out. You're seeing what their kind of behaviours are and that kind of thing.
I'd like to think so. I think one thing I probably do fall short of sometimes, and this is something I need to continue to get better at, but I think naturally you're drawn to people like you. So, I have been guilty of this, where I see someone who's come from a similar background or have worked their way up. I'm naturally kind of, oh, wow, they're great. What I've learned, and because most of my career, well, probably of the 25 years, 16 to 18 years have really been in sales. So sales is where my heart always been. That's kind of what I always go back to. As my seniority's grown, and it was a conscious decision to try and broaden my horizon. I started to learn that actually in non-sales roles, sometimes you're looking for something a little bit different, and they won't always have done the same sort of things that I've done, because the danger, I think, then particularly as you start to manage a bigger business, if you just get 30 people who are like versions of yourself, it's a bloody nightmare.
I know we talk about diversity and that kind of thing, like gender, race, etc. But diversity is about thinking, right? It's about not that hive thinking. And I absolutely agree. I've got a failed business, and that is because I took on people who were like me, and you only really need one knobhead in each business. So it was loads, and it seemed like a good idea at the time, and then all of a sudden you step back and you think, what do I actually need? What I need is people that aren't like me, right? I need people who can do the things I can't. I think that's really important. It's, obviously, being aware of it is important as well, isn't it? Because there's lots of people that I speak, especially in recruitment, when they say, just get me 3 of me. I think, well, 3 of you are running businesses somewhere, right? They're not working for you, and also you'd be a nightmare to manage.
That's true. I completely agree. Yeah.
So how did that change, or was that a conscious change at a point in your career, or has it just slowly sort of come to you, especially, like you say, as your seniority's gone up, hasn't it? So you're having to look at a bigger playing field at the moment. How did that come about?
So, I mean, in terms of my wanting to be more senior, there was a moment where I felt I'd probably hit a bit of a glass ceiling within sales, and that was
Yeah.
as high as I was going to go. Actually, I did, whilst I didn't go to university first time out, I did go back when I was in my 30s. So that was almost the first step for me, which was
Was
I
that
couldn't
for work, or was that something just in your head that you wanted? Because obviously you spoke about education, like it was a thing that meant a lot to you that you hadn't fulfilled your potential. Maybe then was that personal or
yeah,
work?
combination of both, but more personal, to be honest,
Yeah,
of the two. I knew that there'd be some benefit from it, but I didn't know what that benefit would be. I just trusted that actually by doing something that took me way outside my comfort zone, which it did. I know the whole imposter syndrome thing is a very popular train of thought, and back when I did it, I don't think really people spoke about it. But looking back, it was very much what I felt.
yeah,
But then when I actually did the course and I came out with it really good marks and everything, it was a wonderful experience. It did kind of give me that confidence to
yeah.
kick on.
And was it something that you could utilize in business? Was it something that you then
Yes, it
used?
was. Yeah. Not always. I think anything educationally, unless it's a very specific qualification for a specific line of work, you don't always know when you're going to use it, and you
Yeah,
sometimes don't even know you are using it. But it's kind of just adding to that. Adding to your breadth of knowledge and things that in your subconscious start to land. So that was a moment for me when I started to look at actually there's more people out there than just salespeople. There's this whole other world.
yeah, yeah,
And then the humility side of things that probably came as I grew up a little bit. I had kids relatively young for today's world. That kind of taught me quite a lot. I think I did become more humble as I got more senior. I became more humble when
yeah.
it wasn't afraid to
You know
say
what I
when I
think,
didn't
right?
know
The
something.
humble as you grow is really easy to do because you've done it. It's
Yeah.
like it's you know what I mean. It's much easier. It's a little bit like I'm really good at talking about my failings when I'm doing well at something else. Do you know what I mean? I think it
Yeah.
comes naturally, doesn't it? But I think yeah, it's an interesting one.
Mm,
Like I said, it's easy to look back in it and get more humility and that kind of thing because if you weren't successful, you probably wouldn't have seen it as easily. So it's nice to be able to look back, I suppose.
yeah. No, absolutely right. Absolutely right. So yeah, in that respect, it's one of the things I'm glad that it's kind of happened. If I think that
Yeah.
if I was still my 22-year-old self, yeah,
We
much
physically we
much
can't be
harder.
our 22-year-old selves
No,
because we'd never get any
no,
further. We'd
no,
still be.
exactly.
I'd like to call it super focused, but it's arrogance, isn't it, that comes
Yeah,
from
it's
that.
true.
So talk to me. What I'm interested in is obviously you were at Octopus for a long time, weren't you, across the different sides of the business, and then Avamore completely different kettle of fish. I mean, obviously it's still in that management role. What was it? What were the challenges from going from massive business to something that's just very different? Obviously, you had that security with Octopus as well. How was that? How was that for you? And what were those challenges you faced?
So it was. I mean, the good thing was that it was a very similar line of work, as in we fundamentally did or do much the same kind of thing that I was doing before. So it wasn't completely alien to me. I, yes, you're right. Listen, I was at Octopus for an awful long time. I absolutely loved my time there. I still, in contact with people that were there. I
Yeah,
felt so. There's two reasons. One, I felt it was probably just time. I did 10 years plus, and I
yeah,
think that it's maybe a natural point at which you start to look around. But if I'm being honest, I wasn't actively looking. I was approached by Michael, and what started with a coffee became a follow up. And actually, I was hooked really almost straight away. And I was like, when I knew the opportunity was there to kind of come in and lead the business,
yeah,
for me, it was just a feeling of excitement and what felt like just the natural next step. So you're right. There was, of course, the change in dynamic going from
yeah,
a
yeah.
company that's got, well, in total, 900,000 people, I think it was at the time, to a team of 25 to 30 was a huge change. But what I really drew me in was the fact that I could just, from meeting the senior people, and I met other members of the team as well, I could just tell straight away that these were my kind of people, and it
Yeah.
made the transition.
Would you
I
say
wouldn't say
that's one of the most important things when you're looking at new positions about that? you got to buy into it, right? You got to buy into their excitement, their passion, because you're taking over
Yeah.
from it, aren't you? So you've
Oh,
got to.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. I think it's, I wouldn't have just gone to go and work anywhere. It wasn't like, right, where's a CEO or a managing director job or even another, sales director. Actually, the title didn't really bother me, Marcus. It was
Yeah,
more
yeah.
to do with, am I going to go and work with people and for people that I could trust and, believe in, and we could go on the next journey, part of the journey together.
And in regards to kind of your leadership skills, if you like, or your leadership traits, is it much of a muchness when it comes from smaller business to larger? Is there anything you've had to adapt, or is it kind of across the board when it comes to leadership? Is leadership?
Um, it's a good question. For me, I think it's the latter. I think leadership is leadership. I don't think I'm, some of my guys might tell me differently, but I don't think I'm any different today than I was 5 years ago. In terms of my fundamental cause, I've probably, as I've grown up and hit fully midlife, there's different lifestyle choices that I probably make today that I'd like to think have a positive impact on my work and home life. But for me, leadership is leadership, and there's a few key words, and again, it might sound a bit sort of management booky, but for me, trust is probably the single biggest one. One of the things I've always prided myself on is the trust that I'm able to instill in others and they have in me. I genuinely have people's best interests at heart. So I do demand a lot. I think I demand quite a lot of loyalty, as well as that hard work piece. But those who give that to me, or we work together extremely well. And I don't think those two things have changed at all. And as I say, the good thing coming across to Avamore was that with both Michael and Zahir, they kind of felt similarly to me. So it was quite a natural.
Yeah.
There was never a case of, oh my God, who's this Dimitri fella coming in with all these new fangled ways of doing things? Of course, there are certain things I'll do differently to them, but actually at our core, I think we are completely aligned.
Yeah, and you think that's an important thing as well. If you're taking over from another leadership, or especially founders, I think it's probably more challenging for you than anything else, because that was someone's, I hate saying baby about business, but you know what I mean. It's someone. I'm going to say it, someone's baby.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But so, what were the challenges that came with that? That you kind of you're taking over from a business where it was someone started from the ground up. Any kind of major challenges or anything exciting about it, or anything you can kind of add to?
Yeah, so I mean, on the positive, certainly the good thing about it wasn't a case of me coming in and those guys disappearing. So they remained involved, but not so much that it was kind of just like it was, and I'm just an additional person. I think that
there has to be a defined. There has to be defined, doesn't it? Because like you just said, you don't want to turn up day one and then. I bet it must be. I'd love to speak to them as well, because it must be very difficult to relinquish the thing that you've always done as well. I think it's very must be difficult. Sorry, carry on. I interrupted as usual.
No, that's fine. That's okay. No, I think you're absolutely right there. I think that is and I suppose they'd be the ones to ask that question, how that felt, but certainly how it felt from my side of things coming on board. It never felt I was.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. There we go. So I had a call come through, Marcus. I wasn't sure if it would paused our
No,
paused
it's fine.
bit. That's fine. So yeah, no, it never felt like I was treading on toes. Similarly, they undoubtedly would have had moments where they had to consciously take a bit more of a step back. But they both describe themselves to me as the kind of there to help me in whatever way I want. So in that respect, actually, it was kind of all I could have asked for. If you'd have said to me, right, you leave Octopus and then you just go and off you go, start something from scratch straight away, I don't think I would have had the wherewithal to do that. So to have these guys around to help with that, I think is good. I'm also helped by the fact that if I look at my team around me, the senior guys within the business, a lot of them have come through the ranks at Avamore, which has been brilliant. I've complemented that with some external hires as well. So I think we've got a good combination of what's made us successful so far still being around, and then some additional people as well.
Good. And I know you touched on trust and loyalty being right up there with your what you expect from people. So how do you get that, if you like, from an initial standpoint? Because once people have been working with you a while, it's quite easy to build, isn't it? But how do you how do you obtain that as a leader to obtain people's trust and get their loyalty and that kind of thing from a not a standing start, but from when you first start working with them?
Yeah, so I don't think there's a silver bullet to get it straight away. So I do think actually, but
Damn it.
those two things they do take time. I think what you can do to start with is be really honest and tell people what your plans are and um, what things you want to do, what things you don't want to do, and ask that they come along on that journey. I think you have to really encourage people to give you feedback, which is often quite hard if you're asking for, giving feedback to someone who's more senior than you actually can be quite
About
difficult to
that,
do.
giving feedback to senior people, how do you do it? Like, and does it have to be an anonymous? Because people just blow smoke, right? We can say what we want, but if you're working for someone, you don't tend to want to disagree with what they say. But at the same time, as a leader, that if they do and you can take it in and it's something positive, then it helps the business. How do you combat that between people knowing that they can feed back to you constructively?
So you just kind of practice it and do it more regularly. I think that the first time you ever do it, often you might get that answer, which is
Everything's
quite
great.
everything's great, thanks very much. And then I think you as a leader just have to challenge them on it and say, actually, well, no, I want something that is really developmental for me.
Yeah.
So it comes with
Yeah,
just with a
obviously,
little bit of
you
practice.
never know what to work on, would you, if no one ever fed back to you? It's like that, having yes men, having all those people that are similar to yourself.
Yeah,
You'd
yeah.
never grow.
Yeah, exactly. So it takes a little bit of time, but yeah, you get there. You get there eventually. Um, yeah.
It's been an interesting time for you, right? So you've been in a couple of years. You've had a fun, interesting start to your life at Avamore. Obviously, the specialist lending market wasn't as badly hit as some other parts of the market, but just on that, when you've got like a decent sized team like you have, how do you stay reassuring? Is it the honesty thing, and how honest? It's not the right word. How do I word? How honest can you be with your team? Because you've got to make sure everyone understands it's not just you that it's happening to, but at the same time, you also have to keep some of the pressure to yourself in the management side of things.
Yeah.
How do you find that happy medium with the keeping everyone in the loop as to what's happening?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something that I've yet to perfect, and I don't know if I ever will actually, Marcus, to be fair. I
Yeah,
think
but
it's
can
one
you?
of
That's
those
what I mean.
things.
Is there like a magic?
Yeah.
Is there the magic balance? Who knows whether you're being too open or not open enough until
Yeah.
you look
You just
back
got to
at it.
stay true to your own convictions and whatever you feel is appropriate at the time. That's kind of what you go with. I certainly haven't perfected it yet. There's been mistakes I've made in my time here. In fact, throughout, you were saying earlier on, you were talking about your mistakes. It's kind of true. I've done the same, and there's loads of
Yeah.
things I've got wrong as we've gone. And the last couple of years undoubtedly has been challenging for a whole host of reasons. I think it's one thing that experience does help. I was there during the global financial crisis, doing a different role, of course. So I've seen things aren't always great. But I think about the last 6-7 years, there's always been something. So there was the
Yeah, I
Brexit
know.
vote. I forget what other, COVID, the obvious one that thankfully we've kind
Yeah,
of put to the
the
back of our mind.
The Liz Truss fiasco.
Liz Truss fiasco. So there's always been challenges, and you're right. The specialist lending sector, I still think this is why we exist. Like we exist for when things aren't straightforward.
Yeah,
But I can't sit here and say, the last couple of years, market-wise, haven't been challenging because, of course, they have been, and not really for reasons that you could have ever guessed. So
that's right. Yeah, everything's been different as well, hasn't it? It's not ever been like, oh,
yeah.
this is all right. We've dealt with this. Has it helped the fact that you've been through it before, though? When you can reassure people who haven't, like this too shall pass. Is it a nice, it's like a calming effect on maybe the younger generation that have had it? I don't want to sound like an old man when I say had it relatively easy. But do you know what I mean? Haven't up until the last few years haven't really had a tricky market. Has that helped?
I'd like to think so. Yes, I think it does. How much I don't know, because I think everyone's journey as they go through this stuff is slightly different. But yeah, I think it does help, the fact that
Yeah.
I've been there, and I'm not. I guess similarly, if I think back to the financial crisis, there would have been people that I'd have been working with who were around for the house price crash and the
The
massive
interest
recessions
rates
of
and
the 80s, 90s, and the old story of we had a mortgage when interest rates, we paid
yeah.
19% on our
It was a
mortgage.
£7 mortgage, right? It doesn't matter what
Yeah,
it
exactly. I'd take that any day of the week. But so that, yeah, there are always people who've been through stuff before. So
Yeah.
I think naturally people who haven't should take something from those people.
That's really interesting you said that. I've never even thought about that. Obviously, I was around in 2008, and I can't
Mm,
remember ever taking anyone's advice on the don't panic. Mind you, I think I suppose everyone was panicking. It's a
yeah,
little bit
yeah,
different.
yeah.
I think there's a lot more calmer heads now. I think it's just a different market.
Mm,
How do you see the market over the next? We're assuming now no world wars, no pandemics,
yep.
fairly decent run of things slowly getting back to the normal. How do you envisage the market for the next 12, 18 months?
So I think broadly it's a brighter picture than it has been for the last 2 years with hindsight. Um, I think there's a bit more certainty. The word certainty is probably the main difference, is in there's been so much uncertainty on so many bits, particularly in terms of what we do, so, development finance and any variety of that. There's been uncertainty on, well, interest rates. Who knows what, no one knew where they were going to stop. There's a point where people
Yeah.
were, I remember hearing about people paying a 5% ERC to get out of their 5% fixed rate mortgage to take a 7% fixed rate mortgage, because of it, just
They thought it was
panic and
going to go through the roof. Yeah.
uncertainty. Yeah, exactly. So that you've had that uncertainty. How, in terms of house prices, uncertainty, there's been at any given point, people were saying 20% drop, 10% drop, whatever it
Something's
is.
happened with that though,
Again,
right? It's been one point. Was it one between 1% and 3% or something? It's not.
yeah, exactly that. It's much like our GDP. It just seems to fluctuate very close to zero, up and
Yeah.
down. So there's a bit more certainty, I think, around that. In terms of what we do, the cost of materials and the cost of building, that
Yeah.
at one point was absolutely skyrocketing. Again, it feels like that has started to stabilize a little bit more. So you put all those three things together, it should be a brighter outlook. Now, as you said, Mark, that's not. I can't sit here and say
No, that's
2024 is
it.
going to be
No,
a
finish
bumper
on that. I don't want to
year.
hear any.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. I think there are still more challenges to come, and I know you say it's slightly tongue in cheek, but these sort of big global events, it's kind of proven that, of course,
Yeah,
you
it's
can't
massive for us.
necessarily plan for them, but you can't not plan for them, because who knows what there's going to be. But the fundamentals that underpin what I do for a living and what our company does for a living, is to help build more houses
Yeah,
and to
and we
lend
need
in
more houses, so
areas.
you're in.
Exactly that. That thing gives me confidence. Whether it's in the next 12 months, it gets really, really good. Whether it takes 18, I think that
Yeah. I mean,
there'll be
that's a
some.
really good point,
Yeah.
actually, Dimitri. It's not about like cheap money again or anything like that. Like we're not going back to those rates, and it's just the confidence in the market. And if it levels out, whatever it levels out at, that's where we go again.
Yep.
But
Yep.
where it's
Yep.
up and down all the time, that's the bit. You're right. So yeah, I think it's a good point. It's the certainty rather than the market getting better or things improving. Actually, if it just levels out, then everyone knows
Yeah.
where they are, and you can plan from there, can't you? You can't plan in that
Hmm.
roller coaster we're on.
Yeah. Agreed.
Good. So if anyone wants to get hold of you, I appreciate I've taken up a little bit more of your time. I said half an hour, but I will.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'll keep hanging on. If anyone does want to get hold of you or anyone at the team at Avamore, how do they speak to you? What's the best way? Obviously, all your socials will be on our side of things. But if
Yes.
anyone wants to speak,
Yeah, I guess the usual socials. I'm quite old school. Phone is always easy as well, so do feel free to give me or the team a call. We'll have our
oh, can
phone
we
numbers
touch
on
on
there.
that? I know I was going to finish, but I just wanted to touch on that, the old school phone
Yeah.
thing, because I love speak. I love face-to-face meetings. I love speaking on the phone. Emails need to stop, right?
Yep.
You can't handle this. How do you? Because it is becoming a generational thing as well that people talk online. So I do appreciate that that's the norm, but I do think you miss out on a lot. How do you get your team to make sure they understand that we're still in an old school environment of picking up the phone to people?
Yeah, I mean, we have a phone first culture, so it will always be over the telephone is how to um, first get in contact with someone.
Yeah,
I'm with you, Marcus. I much prefer speaking on the phone. You cut through
especially bad
so,
news.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bad news on
I
an
hate.
email is hideous.
Yeah, it's just the worst. And the written word, the problem always with emails or however you're writing to someone, the context is set by the person receiving it rather than the
100%.
person writing it. So
We had this
um,
conversation in the office earlier about someone read out a message going, "Well, this is rude," and
yeah,
they said it in this really rude manner, and I said, "Well, maybe they said this," and she
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
yeah, maybe it wasn't as rude because
yeah,
you're instantly expecting a rude message. It's so easy, isn't it, to look at it and
mm,
be in the mood that you're in. You
mm,
recite that back in someone's voice that isn't
yeah.
is not what they meant at all.
Exactly, completely agree, and I think that is a key part of it. And yeah, you're right. Is it a generational thing? I mean, I've got a teenage daughter, and yeah, I have to tell her actually, don't always. It's not always. Why don't you give them a call? And it's like, what do you mean? Why would I phone them? And I do worry for these kids coming through. It's just not the done thing to speak like
I've
that.
made a massive error, and all my kids have got unlimited calls. What an absolute waste of money that is.
Wasting money. Yeah, yeah,
They
exactly.
never speak to each other. They speak to their friends that could be
Yeah,
waiting outside our house on a message.
yeah,
Do you know,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so strange. Or they'll talk to each other in separate rooms on Snapchat. Before the four kids will be talking to each other. And we think, just pop in
Yeah,
next door and have a conversation. We've done in 5 minutes.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's
So
easily done as well. And I do appreciate we didn't grow up like that, did we? Didn't grow up with
no.
so we spoke.
Yeah, well, it was the house
Do you
phone.
think
That
that?
was the only way to speak to
Yeah.
people. Yeah,
I still know all of my old mates' house phone numbers from when we were kids. But I don't know my wife's number because there's no need to know it now, is there? Because we've all got mobile phones. That's
that's
the world
true.
we live in. Amazing. So, like I said, if anyone wants to get hold of you, all of your details will be on our socials, but
Yep.
yeah, and obviously on yours. But if anyone wants to speak to anyone at Avamore, Dimitri can speak to you through LinkedIn. I'm assuming, and
Yeah,
all the relevant channels.
yeah. That's one socials I'm pretty good at, is staying on top of
Good.
LinkedIn, and then yeah, all the other the relevant bits.
Amazing. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for everyone listening and watching today. And cheers, Dimitri. I appreciate your time. I will speak to you soon.
Lovely. Thanks for having me. Thanks,
Thank you.
Marcus. Cheers.